I left home at 17. I found out I was being watched. It was 3 years ago. I moved into a student apartment 1 hour away from my parents' home. It was for my studies. I was 17 at the time. I had negotiated for a long time with my parents so I could live on my own and study independently, since the school was far from home. At first, they were reluctant, but they eventually agreed. I had a small apartment, but I liked it. I was able to decorate it the way I wanted. I made friends quickly and I met my best friend, Ava. Everything started when a boy moved into the apartment next to mine. At first, I didn't notice him. It was only when I came back from a weekend at my parents' house that I saw a new doormat at the door next to mine. One evening, I was at the common room, a place with couches, a minibar, and a foosball table. Basically, a place where young people could hang out and pass the time. I was there with my friends when a boy entered the room. At first glance, he looked shy and especially lost. Ava suggested inviting him to join us. She got up and came back with him. He sat with us and we went around introducing ourselves. For the rest of the evening, he was quite reserved and didn't talk much, but I didn't pay much attention to it. As we went back up to our apartments, Ava discreetly told me, "Did you notice that he kept looking at you?" "I think he likes you." I just smiled because at that time boys didn't interest me and I was more focused on my studies. Wednesday was a mail day. I went down to my mailbox to get my mail. Nothing special. Just a postcard from my aunt who was traveling in Italy and a few ads. While flipping through them, a small piece of paper fell out with my first name written on it. I opened it. "You dress so well. You're more beautiful every day." I smiled, imagining myself in a romantic TV series, but I didn't think much of it. I talked about it with Ava and we laughed about it. One evening, I was working in a small restaurant near my school to earn a bit of pocket money to buy groceries during the week and occasionally treat myself to some shopping. That evening, he came in. For the story, I'll call him Dylan. He sat at the bar and I went over to take his order. He was very smiley and talked a lot, even though I had other customers to take care of. It was only at the end of my shift at closing time that I realized he had stayed for 2 hours. I found that strange, but I didn't think much of it. We went back up to our apartment together. I was about to say goodbye before going into mine, but he hugged me. I was surprised. He said, "I'm so happy to have a friend here. You're one of the only ones." I was very surprised because we barely knew each other. The next day, I went to school and ran into him in the hallways. He came over to talk to me. We chatted between classes, but the conversation was only about me. He asked questions like, "What city do your parents live in? What's your class schedule? Do you have a boyfriend?" But when I asked him questions about himself, he dodged them and always brought the conversation back to me. In the days that followed, I kept running into him every morning on my way to school, in the evening when I got home, sometimes even in the school hallways. Even though before we hardly ever crossed paths. I found it really strange. I talked about it with Ava and a few friends, but they all told me that maybe he just had the same schedule as me. I thought that the little note I received in my mail might have come from him, but I didn't mention it to him. One day, while I was cooking at home, the doorbell rang. I thought it was Ava coming to pick up some of her things, but when I looked through the people, I saw Dylan and he was already smiling. I hesitated to open the door, but I did anyway, reluctantly. He was holding a box of Ferrero Rocher chocolates. He handed it to me and said, "This is to thank you for being a golden friend." I thanked him and closed the door. That evening, in front of the TV, something clicked. I was eating the chocolates when I remembered that the day before I'd gone grocery shopping with a friend and we had passed by the candy aisle. She bought chocolate, and I had told her that Ferrero Rochers were my favorites. But since they were a bit expensive, I preferred to wait until next month. What was strange was that I hadn't seen Dylan in the store at any point, and I didn't remember telling him that I loved Ferrero Rocher. It bothered me a bit, but I thought maybe he had asked Ava, so I talked to her about it and she told me he had never gone to see her. We both found it strange. Wow. As the days went by, I kept running into him more and more, and every time he came to talk to me. Honestly, it was becoming annoying. I talked about it with some friends, who simply told me to tell him the truth that it bothered me and that he needed to keep his distance. So, one morning in the school hallways, I went up to him, stressed, and told him the truth. Dylan, you're very kind. I know we're neighbors, but I feel like you're following me, and you think you're very close to me, even though we barely know each other. You understand it's not against you, but I like you to keep your distance. At that moment, his face fell. He looked angry and a bit sad. It was hard, but it was better that way. Just before the end of year holiday period, my cousin came to visit me and stayed at my place for 2 days. We spent a good time together, and I ran into Dylan less and less. When I did see him, he didn't even look up at me. I think he was hurt, but I preferred that to him following me everywhere and talking to me non-stop. On the day I walked my cousin to the train station so he could go home, I came back and ran into Dylan in the hallway on our floor. He said hello. I said hello back. And before I went into my apartment, he asked, "That boy, is he your boyfriend?" I told him no, that it was my cousin who had come to visit me before the holidays. He went back into his apartment without saying anything. One evening when I got home, there was a bouquet of flowers placed on the table in my kitchen with a small note on it. Happy holidays. I immediately understood it was from Dylan. But what bothered me was that the bouquet was inside my apartment. Dylan didn't have the keys to get into my place, and above all, he had no right to do that. I took the bouquet and went to ring his doorbell. I'll admit it, I was angry. He opened the door and I said, "Listen, I'm not going to repeat myself again. I'm sorry, but I'm not interested in you, and I don't want your gifts either. So please don't waste your money. Give this bouquet to someone else." His face fell again and he just replied, "Okay." I asked him how he had managed to leave the bouquet in my apartment, and he simply told me that the building caretaker had opened my door so he could put the flowers inside. I didn't look into it any further and went back home. One night I was in my bed when my doorbell rang. It scared me. I woke up with a start. I looked at the time on my phone. It was 3 a.m. and I wondered who could be disturbing me at that hour. I got up quietly and looked through the peephole, but the hallway was dark, so I couldn't see anything. I stepped back slowly, and then there was a soft knock on the door. From the other side, I heard someone whisper, "Open up. I just want to explain myself." I recognized Dylan's voice. I was terrified, because it's not normal to do that kind of thing at 3 a.m. At first, I wanted to check that my door was locked. But if I made noise, he would know I was awake. So I simply went into my bathroom, the only room in my apartment that I could lock. I thought he would leave, but he kept knocking on the door harder and harder. I was terrified. I took my phone and sent a message to Ava. Of course, I didn't get a reply. No one is awake at 3 a.m., especially during the school term. Then I heard a metallic noise. That's when I realized he was trying to force the lock. My heart started racing, but I took my phone and called the police. I was so stressed that I could only give my address, my floor, and my door number. The operator told me she would stay on the line until police arrived. I could feel him pulling on the handle, and I knew time was running out. What would happen if he managed to open the door before the police arrived? The longer I waited, the harder the blows on the door became. At one point, I heard loud footsteps in the hallway and someone shouting. My heart finally calmed when I heard knocking on the door and a man shouting, "Open up, miss. This is the police." I got up and looked through the people. It really was the police. I opened the door and Dylan was on the ground, handcuffed. He was furious. One officer dealt with him while the other took my statement. I told him everything from beginning to end. They said they would call me when they had more information. Then came the holiday period. I stayed at my parents' house for 2 weeks, and honestly, it did me a lot of good. The police called me back, and I was shocked when they told me they had searched Dylan's phone and laptop. They found a lot of information about me. Dylan had found all my social media accounts, even my parents' Facebook account. I also learned that he had previously assaulted his ex-girlfriend several times, and that she had even ended up in the hospital because of him. After that, I finished my studies, but I moved into a shared apartment with Ava. Today, I'm 19 years old, I still live with my parents, and I admit that I'm afraid to live alone again. I don't know when I'll have the courage to do it. How would you have reacted in my place? Wow. Long story, but wow. That is crazy. I mean, Dylan, bro, like, you need to find a different hobby because this is just not healthy. And you can't go around scaring people like that. Like, what the hell are you doing, man? I want to say that the girl who did it, like who wrote this, the OP, I think she handled perfectly. She called the police at the right time. She set boundaries, and that's what you should do, with these kind of guys. And I mean, obviously, nothing was going to stop him. So it's very good that she called the police. And pretty scary. I understand that, you're scared to live alone. That's normal after something like this. But you definitely did the right thing. I would have handled it the same way. And let's see what the comments say about it. So someone commented, "Honestly, I'm so glad the police arrived fast enough, because if he was able to enter before he probably struggled more because he was anxious. I don't think I would live alone in a long time, but I wish this doesn't stop you from living the way you wish to." I agree. Another person commented, "I'm glad that you took the steps to protect yourself, but don't let that incident scare you out of living life. You have to slowly gain your independence back, because if you don't, the crazy-ass stalker wins. You can do it." The night my friends and I almost died. I've never told anyone this story in real life. Not my parents, not my friends. It's been 3 years and I still don't know if the man in the field was just watching us or waiting for something worse to happen. This happened about 3 years ago, and at the time I didn't know who to tell or talk to because I was in complete shock. So the 2 friends I was with that night and I decided to keep it to ourselves. I had 2 friends. Let's call them Zach and Jake. One random day, we were bored. So, we decided to host a party at Zach's house over the weekend. He had a big house, a huge backyard, and a pool, so it was perfect. It was also the weekend right before spring break, and his parents were out of town, which made it even better. When the day of the party arrived, we met up hours earlier to set everything up. Later that night, around 80 people showed up, and even more came after. That's when drinking started. Around 1:30 a.m., people began heading home, but me, Zach, and Jake still had a lot of energy left. I should mention that Zach's house was the last one in his neighborhood. Behind his backyard was a massive cornfield stretching about a mile long. I don't remember the exact distance, There were no houses behind it though, just fields. Zach also had a gate in his backyard that led directly into the cornfield. Zach owned a Can-Am. It had 2 seats, but someone could stand on the back. Around 2 a.m., the three of us had the bright idea to take it into the field while blasting music. I was driving, Zach was in the passenger seat, and Jake was standing on the back. We cruised around the field for about 30 minutes before getting bored and deciding to head back, but we decided to take one last turn. Halfway through the field, a man suddenly appeared. He looked around 60 years old, with grey hair, wearing a vest, and holding a hunting rifle with a scope. It was hard to see him clearly because it was pitch black. The only light came from the Can-Am's headlights. We passed him without stopping, and about 500 feet later, the Can-Am suddenly shut off by itself, even though the keys were still in the ignition. My heart dropped. We were still close enough that he could see or hear us, but when we looked back, he was gone. After a few seconds, which felt like minutes, the Can-Am finally turned back on. We didn't say a word, we just drove straight back towards the house without looking back. Before going inside, we stopped to catch our breath and process what had just happened. That's when we heard a loud bang and something metal hit the Can-Am. We froze. A second later, we heard another shot ring out and something whizzed past us. That was enough. We jumped back onto the Can-Am and sped home. We drove through the backyard, parked it, ran inside the house, and locked every door and window we could find. We turned off every light inside and outside the house. Zach had security cameras, so we went into the room with the monitors showing the backyard and the front of the house. That's when things got even worse. A car slowly drove through the backyard area and stopped. Its headlights stayed on. It just sat there, idling for about 15 minutes. We didn't recognize the car and no one got out. We stayed completely silent, watching the monitors, afraid to even move. Eventually, the car drove away, but we didn't sleep that night. What scared us the most was trying to understand why an elderly man would be standing in the middle of a cornfield at 2:30 in the morning, and how a car could have been so close to the house shortly after. The next morning, we checked Google Maps to see where the man could have come from. There were no houses, no shelters, nothing anywhere near the fields. That meant he was either staying out there, or he had been watching us the entire time during the party. We never told our parents or anyone else. 3 years have passed since then, and the three of us have gone our separate ways and don't talk much anymore. But it's a night I'll never forget, and one I still think about every time I hear something outside late at night. Wow, that's scary, man. Wow. Yeah, what was that guy doing in the field? Like, who would do that at 2:30 in the morning? Also, a rifle. Like, it didn't make any sense. Yeah, I would be scared. I would be so scared. I mean, who does that, guys? Who stands in a cornfield at 2:30 in the morning? Also, I guess they got shot at, which is also kind of insane since they didn't do anything wrong. But yeah, I mean, I think it's crazy. I think you're definitely lucky to get out alive. But yeah, let's see what the comments say about this. So someone commented, "This freaked me the F out to read. Thank you for sharing. As a southerner myself, I've had my share of finding myself lost and staring down the barrel of some old scary man's shotgun. Is it possible he was the owner of the cornfield? If you were buzzing around for 30 minutes like you say, that's plenty of time for someone to hear you and gear up to go see what's going on. Maybe a neighbor saw the lights and an ATV destroying his corn and phoned him up. Maybe he drove over to see what was going on and then followed you guys home, debating whether to wake up the adults he assumed were inside the house and fill them in. Either way, so scary to imagine being teens home alone in this scenario. Glad everybody is safe. So the OP then reacted to the comment. We didn't know why he was there, but we weren't taking any chances. Whether it was the owner of the field, a random person, or someone unstable, we for sure never went anywhere near that field again or effed with it. Then someone commented, did you guys check to see if there was a dent or bullet hole in the Can-Am after the sun came up? So the OP says, we didn't check the Can-Am right away that night, but a day later, my friend said there was a puncture in it on the right side. We don't know for sure what caused it, but it could have been a bullet. Wow, that's crazy. My one and only demonic experience. Before I share this experience, I just need to throw something out there. I mostly use Reddit to post fictional horror stories I've written. However, I do also occasionally post my own true scary experiences. But to make the following paranormal experience of mine a little more credible, I've chosen just write out without caring how good or structured the writing is. Although I can't remember the exact year, it was either 2016 or 2017, when I was most likely 16 years old. I'd been living in the Republic of Ireland for just under 3 years, having moved from England. My family and I lived in the Midlands in a very small town. During my teenage years, because of how depressing my life was, mostly due to hating school, I regularly began believing and praying to God. Naively thinking if I did, He would magically make my life better. Well, it was during this spiritual phase that I came upon a certain YouTube video. The video was about a man who had apparently been brought by Jesus to hell, and while he was there, Jesus showed him all kinds of eternal horrors. From what I can remember, the man saw the souls of people being tortured and burned alive by demons or something. Well, after experiencing this, the man then wakes up in his bed as though from a dream. However, the man claimed what he experienced wasn't a dream at all, but a real experience of what happens to sinners in hell. Although I didn't know if what this man experienced was real or not, it definitely made me terrified of ever spending eternity in the fiery depths of hell. However, not long after watching this video, I suddenly felt very unsettled. Not because of the video I just watched, but to my memory. I almost felt as though I was now being watched, while supposedly alone in my bedroom. But not only did I feel like I was being watched, I also felt like I was somehow in danger. So much so that I left my room to go downstairs, as that's where my parents and sisters were. Now, what comes next is the real scary part of this experience, because as soon as I reached down the stairs, before I could enter any room, I feel a hard physical tap on the back of my shoulder, where I then literally turn around and scream. No word of a lie, I screamed, but when I turn around, there isn't anyone or anything there, as though a ghost had tapped me on the back. Also worth mentioning is that I had screamed so loud that my mom was now shouting me from the living room, asking what was wrong. For the rest of the evening, I remember being very afraid and skittish, that every noise or movement I heard had me incredibly paranoid. In fact, I was so skittish that whenever my dog, who was just still a small puppy at the time, came up to me, I was afraid of her touching me. Living in this house for only a few more months before moving, I never had another experience like this one, nor have I since. Although I've always been a fan of scary stories, real and fictional, I basically know little to nothing about demons or ghosts, as I find aliens and cryptids a lot more interesting. I'm not sharing this story to prove it was a real paranormal experience, maybe it wasn't, but if there's anyone reading this who knows anything about demonic experiences or similar experiences of the supernatural, I would really like to hear your thoughts. Who knows, maybe the whole thing was just a psychological reaction from watching a video about hell being real. However, after sharing the story, I do have to admit something. For the sake of being honest, I do also believe I had a real UFO experience when I was around 11, which I've already written about. No joke, I saw an actual flying saucer from my bedroom window. I already know mentioning this UFO experience doesn't help my credibility regarding my alleged demonic experience, but at least I'm being honest and not holding anything back. Whether you believe I had a demonic experience or not, if you don't, that's fine. If anyone can help me out with what I experienced, even if the whole thing was most likely psychological, I would really like to hear your thoughts. Also, for anyone wondering why I haven't shared this story sooner, since I've already written about my other scary experiences, I think it's just because I already wrote about my UFO experience and doubted anyone would believe I also had a demonic one. Anyway, thanks for reading. Wow, I mean, yeah, it could be psychological, you never know, but um I hear so many stories of people who talk to me, they're saying, yeah, I felt I was being watched and I was alone. It's something that's so common, like also children. I feel like children are more susceptible for this kind of stuff, more spiritual stuff, because you're more open to stuff like this. But yeah, I mean, sometimes I also get the feeling that, I'm being watched when I'm laying in bed or sitting on my couch at night and there's no one there. There's literally no one there. But it just happens, and, maybe it was real, maybe it wasn't. I believe it was real. I'm a believer of the supernatural. Comment if you think this story is real as well or not, and let's see what the comments say about it. So someone commented, so what was your actual experience? You just got scared and felt there were eyes on you, and then somehow decided that it was demonic. I missed the actual demonic part. What supernatural thing actually happened? You maybe felt a tap on the back and you were scared when the dog came near you. I'd say that's just regular overactive kid imagination and just psyching yourself out. Were there any scratches, any growling, noises, or anything else that happened that actually made you think it was demonic? Or you were just spooked from watching this video? Then someone said, the afterlife is very complex. You have to have a lot of knowledge about it. Pretty vague comments. But yeah, it doesn't actually mean it's demonic. A tap on the back isn't automatically demonic. So maybe next time when you post something like that, you can just say I had a experience with a ghost or a spirit or whatever. I don't think it's demonic, but anyway, still a good story. I think my wife was replaced. My wife Claire and I had been working together for almost 10 years. We met in college, both working part-time at the same bookstore. She was quiet, but in a warm way. The kind of person who listened more than she spoke, but when she did talk, she made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We bonded over stupid things, like old movies and our local Chinese takeout restaurant. I remember one of our favorite things to do was walking through town just to talk. She loved thunderstorms and called them cozy. I loved how she leaned into me, when they came. We were boring in the best possible way, comfortable and safe. That's why what happened still doesn't feel real. Claire went missing in October 2025. It was so weird because we were hiking a trail we'd walked dozens of times before. There's nothing dangerous on this specific trail, no animals, no feral people, just a quiet forest with beautiful flowers and a path not far from town. The hike was about 3 hours, and I remember at one point she was walking ahead of me, smiling and loving nature like always. I looked down and noticed my shoelace was loose, so I stopped to tie my shoe. And then, when I looked up, she was gone. There was no sound, no movement, no footprints off the trail. Out of nowhere, she was just gone. I called for her, yelling, "Claire, where are you?" At first, I thought she was messing with me. "Okay, I give up now, you can come out." There was no sound, just the eerie silence of the forest. I walked exactly where she stood when she disappeared. I saw footsteps going off the trail, something I had missed earlier, so I followed them. They were going down a small hill to the lake. Why would she have gone there, I asked myself. It's not like her to just leave and don't say anything. After 4 hours of searching, it got dark. I was worried sick and I called the police. On the first day, we only found a bracelet. Granted, it was her bracelet, but that's all we could find. A fucking bracelet. We searched for 2 days. 50 plus police officers and hundreds of volunteers. Even search and rescue helicopters, but nothing. My wife had vanished without a trace. I went home and tried to think of anything that we could have missed in the search. Any clue to where she might have been, but nothing worked. I had to accept that my wife was gone and probably would never be found again. Then, on the third night, I was crying alone in our apartment, watching some TV. And all of a sudden, I heard a doorbell. Surprised as it was already late and I wasn't expecting anyone, I opened the door. It was Claire. She was standing on the front porch when I opened the door. She wore the same clothes. Her face was a bit dirty, but she had the same smile. I couldn't believe my eyes. "Come in," I said. I held her and asked, "Where did you go?" She said that she got lost, but when she talked, there was no emotion, no fear in her eyes, and also no sense of relief to be home. She said that she'd been wandering around and couldn't find her way back. She told me that she was scared. I held her and cried, but something was off. She felt colder than usual, and she didn't cry back. The first few days, I blamed shock. I mean, what else could I think? My wife was lost in the woods for 2 days. Of course she wouldn't be herself right away. It was probably very traumatizing. Who knows what she had to do to survive? A week after she came home, things changed though. She started doing strange things. She would watch me constantly. And this is not watching lovingly like a couple is looking at each other when they go out to a restaurant, for example. This was nothing like she had done before. When she would listen, before she went missing, she would smile, touch me, and have this sense of warmth about her. That was just gone now. It was nowhere to be found. She would watch me in an intense and focused way, like I was a test she was trying to pass. She literally stared at me while I ate, when I would tell her a story, and while we watched TV. I even woke up some nights to find her staring at me while I slept, which, not gonna lie, scared the crap out of me so much that I started sleeping in the guest room some nights. If I asked what she was thinking, she'd say, Nothing," and then continued watching the movie or sleeping. She all of a sudden forgot things that she loved. Things like her favorite song, which is Total Eclipse of the Heart, or her favorite food, which is spaghetti. No one would forget that. No one would forget those things. Even the way she used to kiss me on the cheek before bed felt different. Her skin sometimes would be ice cold, or she would have a funny smell like metal or mud. It would smell so weird. Sometimes she'd say things I said earlier, word for word, and her voice sounded wrong when she did. She sounded flat and empty, like all the emotion was drained from her. One night, I woke up and she was sitting up in bed, staring at me. Her eyes so wide, I didn't even know it was possible for human eyes to be that big. She would also whisper something when she would stare at me. But when I whispered her name, Claire, she would just slowly lie back down, as she had just been caught doing something she wasn't supposed to be doing. After that night, I started pretending to be asleep. I didn't know why, but I just felt like if she realized I was awake while she was staring at me, something bad would happen. So, when I felt her sit up in bed, I kept my breathing slow and steady. And every time, she watched me. Sometimes for minutes that felt like hours. I could feel her eyes on me in a burning sensation. I could also hear her breathing change. It was shallow and slow, like she was trying to match mine for some reason. One night, I let my eyes crack open just a little. She was inches from my face. Her mouth was slightly open. She wasn't smiling though, or frowning. She was just waiting. Things got worse during the day too. She began standing in doorways without speaking and would just watch me. It felt like she was studying my reaction when I caught her staring at me. I'd look up from my phone and she'd already be there. If I asked how long she'd been standing there, she would say, I don't know. Sometimes she'd repeat questions I asked her earlier in the day, and she was not answering them, literally just repeating them back to me word for word. I had had enough, and I finally decided to test her. I said, Do you remember when we went to the beach last year and you almost drowned? She looked at me. Her eyes didn't change. Yes, she said. My bones were ice cold after hearing her say this, because we had never gone to the beach. It was something Claire and I always wanted to do, but never actually did. That was when I knew not only that she was dangerous, but that she wasn't really Claire. The last night I saw her, she asked me something I'll never forget. She said, "How do you know if someone is real?" I didn't answer. She stared at me for a long time after that. That night, I slept in the guest room with the door locked. And when I woke up the next day, she was gone. She just vanished. There were no notes. She didn't bring any of her stuff, no credit cards, not her car keys, nothing. There was also no sign of a struggle. It was just an empty house. It's been a year now. The police stopped looking. Everyone thinks she wandered off again. But I know that that thing wasn't my wife. Wow. Now that is what I call a insane story. I can't even begin to think where my mind would be in that time, in that position. Like, what the hell would you even do, guys? Like, it's already insane enough that your wife or partner or husband, whatever, goes missing, and then it's just a totally different person. Like, I don't know what I would do. I mean, I would definitely try and arm myself or something. Like, I want to feel like I can protect myself at least. I don't want to die. But also, bro, like, waking up in the middle of the night and she's just staring at you. I mean, that's just straight nightmare fuel. Like, I really hope the OP is doing good. I really hope, he is doing better. It's really horrible. I hope the wife has been found. They only provided the first name. I couldn't really fact check if this story is real, but it was posted under True Scary Stories, so I have to assume it's real. I went hiking with my friends. Something followed us home. So, this is a throwaway account because I still live close to where this happened, and I don't want this connected to my real name. I'm not exaggerating when I say that even posting this makes me feel exposed in a way I can't fully explain. I've tried writing this so many times that the story feels worn down in some places, like a path that's been walked over and over again until the ground is bare. But every time I stop, the memories come back. Sharper, louder, and harder to ignore. I don't really believe that writing this will fix anything, but I'm starting to think that keeping it locked inside my head might be worse. Also, my therapist advised me to talk about my demons, so here we go. This happened in October 2024, and I don't think any of us walked away from it intact. For context, I'm Ethan, 26 male. The friends involved were Lucas, 27 male, Mark, 26 male, Hannah, 25 female, and Emily, 24 female. We'd all known each other since college and had slowly transitioned into that phase of adulthood where you don't see each other as often as you used to. You don't really go out to party and get wasted anymore, and cringe when you see it. Now, when we meet up, it's more like a Friday night, game night, or a wine tasting. I mean, Mark even talked about starting a book club. No thanks, man. I'm not 65 years old yet. One thing I can say is that when we do meet up, it feels like no time has passed. We were never thrill seekers. None of us were into paranormal stuff, so we also never even joked about stuff like cryptids or skinwalkers. The only cryptid I've ever known was the Loch Ness Monster, and that would all change in October. I was sitting in the subway when I realized that we hadn't met up in over 2 months, which is nothing unusual as grown-up lives tend to get busy. I came home, hung my coat, and I checked my phone. I saw that there was a message in the group chat. The group was talking about going on a holiday together. Mark was the first to really voice it, saying he felt like his life had turned into a loop of alarms, deadlines, emails, and screens, and that he just couldn't remember the last time he felt present anywhere. Hannah had just ended a long relationship that left her questioning her own judgment and instincts. Emily felt restless and trapped in her routine, and Lucas carried that quiet background anxiety that never fully leaves, even when everything looks fine on the surface. I think it's safe to say that we all deserved a much needed break. So I suggested hiking because it felt harmless, almost cliche, like you get to disconnect, touch grass, and reset. I also genuinely believed that getting away from phones and noise might help us feel human again. I must say, I do tend to stay away from social media like Instagram and TikTok, as I do think they rot your brain. Yes, I'm one of those. In hindsight, I often wonder if the wood sensed us coming, just as animals do, long before, for example, the first drop of rain falls. We decided on the spot that we would go that day. It was a 20-mile hike that we would do in about 2 days. Since none of us had ever been on a hike before, we decided to pick something not too far in the middle of nowhere, but also not too close to the city, a hike that would be fairly easy to walk. When we arrived at the start of the trail, we checked all our equipment once again. We had a hiking pack each and plenty of food to last at least 4 days if we came across bad weather for some reason. We all had a compass and a map of the area, and I had a first aid kit as well. The trail looked normal enough when we arrived. I mean, there was a faded wooden sign with the name Bear Creek Loop. Gravel crunching under our boots, tall trees framing the entrance like a doorway, and the air smelled damp and clean. You know, that familiar mix of soil, pine, and decaying leaves that usually brings a sense of calm. But there was something wrong with this trail. I felt it when we were driving to the trail, a feeling that you can't explain, the same feeling you get when you just know someone is lying. The first thing I noticed at the trail was how quiet it was, but not a peaceful quiet or the soothing absence of the city noise. This was a hollow quiet that made every sound feel intrusive. It was like we were trespassing somewhere we didn't belong. No birds were calling, no insects humming, and there was no distant movements of animals through the underbrush. There was just the dull rhythm of our footsteps and the occasional creak of trees shifting under their own weight. It reminded me of the silence that settles in a room right after someone says something unforgivable during an argument. That heavy, charged pause where you can almost feel the air pressing against your skin. Mark joked about it, saying the place felt like the beginning of a horror movie, but his voice sounded slightly too loud, echoing strangely between the trees, and the joke died quickly. As we walked deeper, the forest seemed to close in, like the space around us was shrinking. The light filtering through the canopy felt muted and flat, giving everything a washed-out quality that made it hard to judge distance. I remember thinking that the woods felt older than they should have, not just in age but also in awareness. It was as if they were watching us pass through with a quiet, patient interest. About 2 hours in, Hannah slowed to a stop without saying anything. Her head tilted slightly, eyes unfocused, and she raised her finger in the air, as if she were listening to something just beyond our hearing. "Did you guys hear that?" she asked. We stopped walking immediately, and the sudden stillness made the silence rush back in, thick and oppressive. For a few seconds, there was nothing, and I felt a flash of embarrassment for being so on edge already, preparing to laugh it off. Then we heard it. "Hello?" It was a man's voice, distant and faint, carried strangely through the trees like a sound echoing through a tunnel. It didn't sound panicked or urgent. It actually sounded confused, like someone who realized too late that they were lost. Everyone was quiet. I was so surprised. I mean, we picked one of the most deserted trails in America for a reason. We wanted to get away from people. We didn't know to respond or not. Then all of a sudden, Lucas called back instinctively without thinking, "Hey, are you okay?" The silence returned, heavier than before, and I remember feeling a cold knot form in my stomach because the forest seemed to absorb his voice instead of reflecting it. When the voice spoke again, it just repeated the same word in the same tone, but this time it came from a completely different direction. The knot in my stomach tightened because no matter how hard I tried to rationalize it, there was no way a person could have moved that fast through terrain like that without making a noise. Emily whispered, "That doesn't make any sense. How could he have gotten there that fast?" We didn't investigate. We also didn't call out again. We just kept walking, pretending that logic alone could protect us from something we didn't understand. Looking back now, we should have turned around and left right there. By the time we reached the clearing near Bear Creek, the light was starting to soften, shadows stretching longer between the trees. The creek itself made a gentle, steady sound as water moved over rocks, which almost felt comforting after hours of unnatural silence. But even that noise felt muted. As we set up our tents, Emily noticed something near the edge of the clearing and called us over. There were footprints. And not just regular footprints, these were bear footprints. They weren't chaotic or random, they formed a loose, deliberate cycle around the campsite, pressed into the dirt slowly, as if whoever made them had taken their time walking around us, observing from every angle. They were human feet. No shoes, no animal tracks, just bare skin meeting earth. I remember an intense, sudden awareness of how exposed we were and how thin the fabric of our tents was, how easily something could get us in the dark if it wanted to. That night, the firelight cast long, distorted shadows that stretched between the trees, making it feel like the forest itself was alive and leaning inward inch by inch. We talked more than usual, about nothing important, college memories, inside jokes, old stories, just anything to avoid sitting quietly with our thoughts. Around 11:30 p.m., when the fire was burning low and we were finally preparing to turn in, Emily whispered, "Do you guys hear that too?" We heard footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps, crunching against leaves and dirt, stopping and starting, circling the campsite in a wide arc, like whoever was walking wanted us to know they were there without fully revealing themselves. Lucas stood up and called out, "Hey, who's there?" The footsteps didn't stop. That's when Hannah grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. Her fingers digging into my sleeve. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Ethan, that sounds like me." Before I could process what she meant, a voice spoke from the trees. It was a voice I recognized. This was a woman's voice. Wait a minute. This was Hannah's voice. "Guys, where are you?" Hearing it detached from her body, slightly off in pitch and timing, triggered a visceral fear that bypassed logic entirely. It reminded me of listening to an old voicemail recording of my dad after he died, hearing his voice but knowing the person it belonged to was gone. Emily started crying immediately, shaking her head and repeating, "That's not funny." Like she could will it into being a joke. Hannah stood up, trembling, and said, "I didn't say that. I swear I didn't." Then I saw something. I don't know if the others saw it too, but when I looked around the campsite, I saw a pair of glowing red eyes. Then the voice spoke again, but slower this time, as if choosing its words carefully. "I'm lost. Can you help me?" Lucas leaned in and whispered, "Do not answer it." We didn't move. We didn't speak. We just listened to the footsteps. We just listened as the footsteps continued to circle us for what felt like hours before they finally stopped. None of us slept that night and we didn't talk. The next morning felt unreal, like waking up after a night of fever dreams. Everything seemed too sharp. Colors were just too bright at the moment, and sounds were too loud. Nerves were stretched thin. It really felt like it didn't even happen, and everyone felt like this. Lucas walked over to me and said, "Bro, do you also feel like what happened last night was a dream?" I told him, "Yeah, man. It's as if the forest itself doesn't want us to know what happened or something." Hearing those words come from my own mouth was weird, to say the very least. I had never been a believer of the supernatural, let alone ghosts or cryptids, but this really happened. As we hiked further into the trail, the forest felt like it was watching us leave. Not angry or aggressive, but quietly disappointed. Like we'd interrupted something and were now slipping away before it was finished. Then I heard a horrible noise. It was Emily, and she was screaming. She was pointing towards a rocky ridge overlooking the trail where something tall and unnaturally thin stood completely still, watching us, but also looking past us in a way. At first glance, it looked human, but at second glance, nothing about it was right. Its limbs were too long, its posture was wrong, its neck bent at an angle that made my stomach churn. Its skin looked stretched and loose in places like it didn't quite fit what was underneath. And its face looked like someone had tried to recreate a human expression from memory and failed. When it smiled, the expression lingered too long. Held in place like someone practicing in a mirror. Lucas whispered, "Don't look at it. too long. That's when it ran. Not toward us. Away. Vanishing into the trees with an unnatural smoothness that made almost no sound. We decided then and there that the safest option was to leave everything there and run the rest of the trail back to our cars. Reaching the parking lot felt like surfacing after nearly drowning. Relief crashing over us when we saw cars, pavement, and signs of normal life. That's when Hannah asked, "Where's Mark?" We turned around. He was gone. His backpack was sitting neatly at the trail entrance, like it had been placed there on purpose. Lucas and I decided to walk back onto the trail to see if he got stuck somewhere. We walked for about 30 minutes and then we hear it again. "Help me," it said. It was Mark's voice. I was about to run to the sound when Lucas stopped me. Listen to the voice. Does that really sound like Mark? Then I heard it again. "Help me." It kind of sounded like him, but also it didn't. Lucas said, "We are going to run back to the cars on 3. 1, 2, 3, let's go." We got out of there in one piece, but we were unable to find Mark. We called the police and search teams came a couple hours later. There were park rangers with dogs. His name echoed through the woods for hours. "Mark, where are you?" But they never found him. I tried to find out what that animal could have been that we found in the woods. On some websites, it says that it could be a skinwalker, which is some sort of shapeshifter which tries to possess you and use you for whatever its purpose might be. It can also transform to look exactly like you if it possesses you. I also found out that 4 other people have gone missing on the exact hike that we went on. Clearly, there was a reason it looked so abandoned. A couple of nights later, when I was doing some research on my phone, I got a message. I couldn't believe my eyes. Mark texted me. "I'm okay, don't worry. I got lost, but I'm heading home." I asked him, "Where are you?" He never answered. The rest of the group met up at Lucas' apartment and we were talking about Mark when the doorbell rang. It was Mark, but not totally him. It looked like Mark, but his eyes were red and his arms, they were too long. The longer you watched him, the more unsettling it became. "That's not Mark," Emily whispered. "Close the door and call the police," I said. "I learn," Mark said before running away. Hannah started crying. She said, "That's not him. It can't be." Emily disappeared 2 days later. Her last message said, "I'm with Mark and we're fine. Please don't worry about us." The photo she sent showed her smiling, but in the mirror behind her, Mark was watching his face twisted into something no human should be able to make. You may be wondering why I'm writing this. Well, last week, someone knocked on my door. Through the wood, I heard my own voice say, "Ethan, it's me. Open up." I was sitting alone on my couch, reading the newspaper, and I didn't move. If you hear someone calling your name in the woods, don't answer. Alright guys, I hope you really liked the story. I thought it was a really great story. If you haven't done so far and you've watched all the way, then you should subscribe, you should like, save this video. But yeah, I wish you all a great day, and I'll see you next time. See you later.